How to deal with conflict is the thing that I'm going to speak with you about today. And there's many ways to go about this, but it's something that most people do not like. Even if you go looking for it, it's not something you really like. It's not the natural way to be in conflict as a human, with yourself or with others. That's why we don't like the feeling. So the best way to handle conflict, I'll start with talking about others and then I can bring it back into us, is you want to understand, right, what conflict actually is to you first, because it means different things to different people. All right. For me, conflict is when you're sort of having to do something against like what naturally feels right, like I said before. And that might be like having a tough conversation with somebody, having to fire somebody, having to ask for a favor, having to tell someone that the way they treated you isn't correct, having to tell somebody that the way they're handling themselves isn't correct, having to go and speak to somebody who's in a position of authority over you and get them to realize that they're not treating you correctly, or that you'd like some help with something, or whatever it is, right? Maybe it's even just asking a teacher at school for help. The point is, that's an element of conflict. It doesn't mean you're going to butt heads about it, but you're conflicted within yourself. You don't feel confident, you don't feel stress-free, you don't feel easy about doing it. So the first step to anything with conflict is actually assessing that you need to have the conversation, and then it might get uncomfortable for a little bit. And a simple line that's helped me in my life a lot is, it's like short-term pain for long-term gain. They're the only type of conflict you ever want to engage in, right? And that might be, for example, telling someone the way they're treating you doesn't serve you. That might be painful to say at the start. It might upset them, it might upset you, but the long-term gain from that is that they treat you better, or that they understand how you want to be treated, or that you've at least expressed to them your truth and give them a chance to have a relationship with that. This is the way in which you should all look at handling conflict. If you're choosing to contribute to conflict by not being honest with yourself or them, then all you're doing is making the mess bigger. Conflict should be treated as a starting point to resolve something, to make something better. Because when you start coming from that lens, then all of a sudden what seems conflicting to you becomes very clear. And even though it might be uncomfortable, it becomes less conflicting. It needs to be done. You can see how it needs to, I guess, transpire and what it needs to turn into to make it better for everybody moving forward. All right. So it does require an element of bravery. It really does. Requires bravery, because if you don't know how to step into what it is you want, then the conflict that you're going to have with somebody else, you will live within yourself. That conflict will be internalized and you will live with it. And that's where most conflict sort of lives for us. It's in our inner state. It doesn't serve anything. That internalized conflict then doesn't allow us to show up in the world and deal with the external conflicts that can actually serve everyone in a better way. All right, so next time you're faced with a conflict, understand what it is first and foremost that you feel funny about or resistance to, and then choose to be honest in a way that doesn't hurt the other person or doesn't hurt you. Because if you come from that place of intention and they happen to feel hurt, then that's on them. I don't mean that where you're being dismissive of their feelings, but I mean if you come from a place where you're trying to be calm and centered and relaxed and loving and peaceful, and they take offense and they turn around and say, rah, 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 you have no regrets there, because you come from a loving place and they chose to take it somewhere else. But if you come with a sense of conflict and you're a little bit abrupt and you're a bit abrasive, well, that's sort of your area to own, all right, and make a better decision with next time. So that's how I handle conflict. The other way as well is to always be upfront. I'm really big on that. Think about how many times you say something about somebody behind their back, but to their face you'll smile about it. Do you know what that really is? That's a burning heart with a smiling face. Because the inside is not happy with what you're looking at, but you pretend you are because you're either intimidated by them or you don't want to deal with the consequences that come from it, or something else. But the harsh reality is you're already dealing with the consequences because you already feel conflicted, and that's going on inside you, and that's the most real thing you got. All right, so be aware of that, be upfront, be honest, get it done early. The more you sit there and fester and stew on things, the harder the conflict gets, the bigger it becomes. So do your best to find a way to actually work through the conflict with a proactive approach, being honest, being loving, coming from your heart, and then allow the other person you're speaking to, or a future version of yourself, if you're talking to yourself about something, to have a real relationship with your honest approach, rather than you pretending to be something you're not to them or not showing up in the way in which you feel you should be. That's what's helped serve me. That's the advice I've passed on to all the other people that I help or work with. And that's the advice I want to pass on to you today, and the guidance that can hopefully help you deal with conflict better. Understand what it is, know how you want to move with it moving forward, and then choose how you want to interact with the conflict that you've got to have. And never forget why you're speaking in the first place, and never forget why you have an element of conflict within you or to them. Is the conflict within you or is the conflict within them? Very important to make sense of those things moving forward. And then the rest is just trial and error. That's what life is. You know, as long as you come from a loving, intentional place, you're doing your part to resolve the conflict. And you can't do any more than that. The rest is up to the other person or the future version of yourself to handle their part of the equation. All right. So I hope it helps, and I'll speak to you soon.